Hello from the wood shop today. This is Pastor Rick. I've been wanting to share with you, the congregation, even the community who view this, some thoughts that I've been pondering since George Floyd was killed in Minneapolis, Minnesota on May 25th. I've had a really deep sadness, and my heart continues to break. And it aches. Much of the interchange that's surrounding Mr. George Floyd's homicide seems to be that listening is lost, drowned out by highly vocalized fear and anger across the board and across populations. I'm sad because there are some in law enforcement and government who use their position and power to dominate and lose sight of the call to serve and to protect. And I'm sad because there are some in our general populace who are using this time of loss and upheaval to leverage ongoing criminal behavior while using people in the legitimate search for justice and equality as a cloak to hide behind. I'm sad because it's too easy for people of privilege to disregard the injustice in our midst because of some bad apples who are being criminal. The acts of criminal elements across our country, even around the world, does not change the reality that there is racism and prejudice in our midst. We can become distracted from the deeper spiritual and human issues which, when addressed and healed, lead to life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for all. We cannot allow ourselves to be captivated solely or primarily by violence and rioting, who are simply out for an unleashing of destruction and a leveling of injustice scale by stealing. This is not justice. For 7 years as your lead pastor, I've talked about and practiced to the best of my capacity and ability suspended judgment. Why? Because often there is more to a situation than first meets our eyes and our ears. When we are introduced to a story, we are instantly drawn to the parts of the story with which we agree and or disagree. We have emotional connections to the parts of the story that resonate with us. And sometimes without realizing, we cease at this moment, at this point, to listen, and predetermined beliefs, including our prejudices, kick in and dominate our responses. In this mode, we often generalize groups of people, literally judging an ethnicity, a socioeconomic level, and or a lifestyle as all the same. In this mode, we miss important nuances and parts of the story. How do I know this? 2 reasons. 1, I've done it. And 2, my history as a human being for 63 years and a pastor since 1978 reveals that this is a human condition common to all of us. We have prejudice. Ask me if my grandson is the brightest, best looking, and most well-behaved, and without a doubt, I will say yes. And if you happen to have a grandchild and you say even above mine, I will say yes without any, and I do mean any hesitation. Kind of ironic or funny thing here, I expect you will disagree with me, and it's okay. Why? Because I expect you to represent your grandchild. However, if we overlook the areas of improvement and maturity that our children and grandchildren need because of our prejudice, we set them up for conflict and failure later in life. Unknowingly, we communicate to them that prejudice is okay. When we fail to see, acknowledge, and address, as Jesus said in Luke 6:41, the log in our own eye, that's the New Revised Standard Version, We create environments of injustice and inequality because we have not owned our own contribution to the dis-ease, the injustice, and the pain in our communities. A little over a year ago, a number of our staff and laity leaders participated in a workshop on trauma-informed care. One of the significant insights of this work is that persons who experience trauma in life and have no constructive pathway to address it become perpetrators of trauma on others. In this maturity area of life, they become stuck at a younger maturity age. Trauma-informed care leads teachers and others who serve to protect people in the presence of outbursts and to do interactions that will give a pathway of expression for individuals to address their feelings and grow into a healthier maturity. There's much more to that than what I've stated, but for now, that'll suffice. If we want to interrupt the cycle of prejudice, injustice, and violence, we must be willing to hear beyond the outbursts so that we can share in connecting a pathway for constructive healing and relationship building and restoration. Sheriff Chris Swanson in Flint, Michigan did this by taking off his riot gear, asking people who were protesting what they wanted, and joined in walking with them. Police Chief Art Acevedo in Houston, Texas, asked for listening and interactions that win hearts instead of alienating people. Putting people in jail for their outbursts will clear the streets and give an appearance of calm and normalcy in the short term. Do you believe even for one moment this action will cause a healing and transformation in the persons who were jailed? I believe too often what happens is the internal anger and mistrust boil to a greater cauldron held in solely by incarceration. Someday, though, they are released, and the action of incarceration with no work to hear, mentor, or heal results in ticked-off individuals who have very short fuses. Put a group of people like this together, and the likelihood of further outbursts increase. And, my friends, by our own actions, we will have helped to create it. Ironic that the human condition's primary response to disagreement at this level is akin to pouring gasoline on a fire and wondering why we got burned. Too often, neither rioters or law and order stop to listen or examine their own misaligned assumptions, thus committing us to a win-lose conflict where its end comes only when our human loss reaches a point that we are forced to stop or face the obvious annihilation of our communities and country. My friends, we are better than this. Do we need to be able to discern in the heat of conflicted moments to recognize a perpetrator's hiding from accountability by speaking or living a lie, criminal actions veiled as protests? Yes. Do we need to be able to discern in the heat of conflicted moments to recognize the legitimate expression of injustice, inequality, and pain as a current reality? Yes. Is this easy to do, or clear-cut for police, or for any of us, for me, or for you, to do so in the heat of conflict? I don't believe it's that easy. We need a suspension of criminal activity, a deconfliction of what are now opposing forces, so that a time of active listening may be had to hear and to acknowledge, to recognize the fear, injustice, mistrust, and community dis-ease. This active and transparent conversation removes the veil used by people, criminal or law enforcement or others, who want to use the conflict as a cloak to hide their illegal and evil activity. At the same time, each of us, individually, must come to grips with our own level of prejudice and the injustice that we have perpetrated either intentionally or unintentionally. We cannot change groups of people. Only I can change myself. Only you can change yourself. When sufficient numbers of us live the transformation of Jesus we are called to be, then there will be an emergence of ongoing communities of health and relational maturity. There will be a lessening of injustice and inequality and pain. There will be an elimination of prejudice and mistrust. And our communities will become the United States of America, the kingdom of God, for which all of us hope and dream. Thank you for listening. I invite you to comment, to give feedback, to converse with me using our social media possibilities. God bless and Godspeed.